Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning. My name is John Barrow, and I'm proud to be the Democratic nominee for Secretary of State for Georgia. And I want to build on what's been said by pointing out something that is painful for a lot of folks to acknowledge, and that is that Brian Kemp and Casey Cagle both suffer from the same problem. They want to impose their personal, religious, and other ideological views on others in our state, even to the point of imposing their views on the business community in the state. Now, I'm a Democrat that's been endorsed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce when I was running for re-election to Congress, endorsed by the National Association of Manufacturers, endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Businesses. And so I feel like I have had an opportunity to visit with and get to know the needs and concerns of the business community in this state and across the nation. And I can tell you they're shocked and appalled at the prospect of people wanting to take the business climate we got in Georgia, that's the product of generations of bipartisan leadership, and use it as a whipping boy, and to use the platform of their office to impose a narrow, partisan, ideological, and oftentimes religious viewpoint on their fellow citizens and the businesses that are doing business here in the state of Georgia. I can tell you that businesses like Home Depot, Delta, Mercedes-Benz, Coca-Cola, they know their business a whole lot better than anybody who works under the Gold Dome here in this legislature. And they have succeeded by knowing their business better than their competitors. And the last thing that they need is for politicians, state house politicians, to be using their ability to influence and affect the business climate in the state to impose their ideological views on Georgia's biggest and best employers. The policies that business needs in this state, that business look for in this state, are policies that will lift up our population and make it, and continue to make it, a place where folks want to invest their capital in our human capital, in the labor in this state. No state can be an attractive place for a business to invest in if their people are sick or their people are uneducated. And Mr. Kemp and Mr. Cagle both have to live with the legacy costs of years of neglect on our educational infrastructure and the current willful neglect of the opportunity to take advantage of investments in healthcare that Georgia taxpayers are paying for but not getting. Talk about education. No state can be a good place for business to invest in for the long term if the population isn't as educated as it can be and ought to be. And we're dealing in this state with 10 years of neglect in the educational budget as the folks, including Mr. Cagle and Mr. Kemp, chose to slash the education investments of this state during the recession. There is a legacy cost we're going to be dealing with for years, for 10 years of folks who've been starved of the resources they need to educate and give our kids the best leg up. And look at what teachers are saying in states like Kentucky and Arizona and Oklahoma. Those aren't flaming blue states. Those are states where teachers have the respect of their fellow citizens, and they've risen up to say they're tired of the kind of disinvestment program that Casey Cagle and Brian Kemp have supported over the years. Look at our investment in our people's health care. Georgia is paying the current cost right now of refusing to participate in the Medicaid expansion that Georgians are paying for whether they like it or not, but are not getting because of the policies of Casey Cagle and Brian Kemp. Those are the gentlemen who are leading the fight to refuse to participate in a program that Georgians are supporting through their federal income tax dollars. Meanwhile, we're supporting and subsidizing Medicaid expansion in places like California and New York with our tax dollars, but we're not availing ourselves of the same benefits here. And what's the impact? The impact is we have hospitals all over the state of Georgia that are closing because the old safety net's been withdrawn and the new safety net is being rejected by people like Casey Cagle and Brian Kemp. No business is looking for a long-term investment in this state, especially in the areas of the state most affected by the refusal to deal with this crisis in Medicaid expansion, are going to look at this as an encouraging sign. This issue and this problem is reflected in my own campaign for Secretary of State, because the candidates I'm running against now, Brad Raffensperger and David Bell Isle, have both been given the opportunity to call out the incompetence of Brian Kemp and his extremism in the course of their campaign to succeed him, and neither has been able or willing to call him out on his incompetence or his extremism. Case in point, 6.5 million Social Security numbers given to the Secretary of State's office for the purpose of making sure that people who are showing up to vote are the actual folks entitled to vote, been surrendered and given away by that office to folks who didn't even ask for it. That kind of incompetence has been met with nothing but crickets by folks in the legislature and by the folks who are running to succeed him on the other side. Also, the server that maintains the records of how the elections have been conducted over the past, just 3 or 4 days after a lawsuit is brought to challenge the maintenance and the security of these records, they're all wiped clean while a lawsuit is pending. You can listen to the comments of Republican candidate for Governor Clay Tippins, who said anybody in the private sector guilty of the kind of incompetence presided over by Brian Kemp would have been fired for his incompetence in the private sector. And yet now he's seeking elevation to the highest office in the gift of the people of this state. That is a huge challenge to the business climate in this state, where business knows better than to reward incompetence like that. I want to close my comments by pointing out something that a friend of ours has said any number of times. The best economic policy, economic development policy for a state like Georgia is to stay off the pages, the front pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post. And because of the incompetence and extremism of Casey Cagle and Brian Kemp, that's exactly where Georgia has been for all of the wrong reasons during this primary campaign. We've been on the front pages of the New York Times because of Casey Cagle's determination to punish Delta Airlines, Georgia's largest employer, for having the temerity to exercise its choice, knowing its business better than the General Assembly does, to try and withdraw from some of the contentious debates in our society. They're paying a penalty for that because of the policies of Casey Cagle. Brian Kemp, for his part, is taking the cruelest and crudest approach toward a very sensitive problem we have in this country of how to deal with the conflicting problems of border security and pathway to citizenship, the humanitarian crisis that's resulted from our failure to deal with this issue over the years. Don't think that business doesn't notice when candidates for the highest office in the state practice that form of incompetence in their prior jobs and preach that kind of extremism in their attempt to get the next job. Business knows better, and I hope the voters in Georgia do. Certainly, all of the folks I've talked with across the state, especially Republicans, fair-minded and open-minded pro-business people across the state, realize the challenge we're facing right now. This is an opportunity for us to continue to build on a bipartisan legacy of creating an economic climate based on a healthy and educated workforce, or to pursue instead the kind of politics of partisan division that may get you an election, but it does so at the cost of the progress of your state. We have benefited in this state for years because we had wiser and better leadership than that. We have wiser and better leadership than that right now, and we can still do better. We must trade up, we must not trade down.